Hey! Hey! You're back! Well, welcome back to my grand estate, friend. Sorry I'm a little late. Chester walks sometimes go a little long. He tends to lie still for hours and then sporadically go real fast for like 10 seconds. It's kind of annoying. Yeah, I know you're cold-blooded, Chester. It'd just be nice if you could shake a leg from time to time, that's all. Well, anyway, let's head on in, friend.
Surprise!
Holy shit! Oh, Geoff? Natalie? What the hell are you two doing here?
Congrats on the new place, man. Here, I brought you a 6-pack. Well, 2-pack now. I got thirsty.
I made you a lasagna. I swear I did. I put it on the table there, but the next time I looked, it was gone.
Pardon me. Oh, you goddamn ghostly prick. I love lasagna! Oh, well. It's the thought that counts, Nat. Hey, tell me about this story.
So, this one's like a really dark memoir, but with layers of horror and family drama.
Huh. Kinda like a lasagna, then.
One left, bud.
Oh, thank you, Geoff. You're too kind. Ooh, it's the Crimson Hour here at my new weekend abode. So we better get started, 'cause when that last lick of light fades away, it's gonna be you, me, Chester, Geoff, Natalie, and whatever else is waiting in these walls for the lights to go out. Anyway, our story tonight comes courtesy of our own N.M. Brown, a tale of dark family secrets and insidious heritances. So without further delay, from author N.M. Brown, I give you The Hunt. My father received the call at 4:18 a.m. The shrill pierce of the cell phone rang throughout the entire upstairs of the house like a siren's call. Dad always hated sleeping with his door closed, but because my mother insisted on sleeping naked, he was often left with no choice. Now that it was just the two of us, I was surprised he didn't remove the door to his room from the hinges entirely. Needless to say, we both found ourselves shocked awake by the unexpected call. I only heard him say a few words. "What happened?" and "For how long?" followed by a soft, quaking, "Good Christ." If the words weren't enough, the solemnity of his tone let me know that whatever happened wasn't good at all, and this was likely to affect us both. Granddad's road to recovery wouldn't be a smooth one, but we'd get there. After the accident, he spent nearly a month in the hospital, a place he hated almost as much as getting old. It was strange seeing him laid up like that, his body a tangle of wires and tubes, his once powerful frame reduced to something fragile and diminished. I started visiting him on the weekends, making the drive out to the rehabilitation center just to sit by his side for an hour or two. Most of the time, he just stared out the window, his gaze far away and hollow. The nurses said it was common after a bad fall, but it looked like something deeper had occurred within him. He was mentally gearing up for something, though I had no idea what. There were days when he'd hardly say a word, his face twisted in pain as he tried and failed to shift in his hospital bed. I'd watched him, not knowing what to say, the silence between us growing heavier with every visit. I'd make small talk, telling him about school, friends, whatever nonsense I thought might break through that iron wall of stubborn silence he had built around himself. Occasionally he'd grunt or nod, but mostly he just sat there, lost in his own world. But then there were the good days too. Days when I'd walk into his room and find him sitting up, cursing the doctors under his breath for making him stay another damn day. He'd smile at me then, a tight, fleeting thing, but it was there. On those days, I'd listen as he ranted and raved about the old times, about all the things he still planned to do once they let him go. He talked about rebuilding the old hunting cabin, expanding the property, maybe even buying some horses again. His eyes would light up with that old spark, and for a moment it was like he was back, like the granddad I knew hadn't abandoned us after all. Sometimes I'd just sit beside him, staring at the same patch of sky he seemed to find so fascinating, letting the quiet stretch between us. He had never been one for heartfelt talks or emotional confessions, but I think he appreciated the company. He'd glance over at me ever so often, like he was making sure I was still there, and then he'd sigh softly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. We didn't need to say much. Being there was enough. Then, just as the weather started to turn cold, Dad pulled me aside one evening after dinner. His expression was lighter than it had been in months, a rare flicker of relief in his eyes. "Just got off the phone with the rehab center," he said, a faint smile on his lips. "Your grandpop's back to his old self. Gave the physical therapist an earful this morning and tried to walk out without clearance. Hell, nearly succeeded too," Dad chuckled, shaking his head. "They're thinking of discharging him next week if he keeps it up." A sense of hope swelled in my chest, warming me from the inside out. Grandpop was tough, tougher than anyone I knew. If anyone could claw their way back from something like that, it was him. But as Dad turned away, I caught a flicker of something. Just a shadow in his eyes, gone almost as soon as it appeared. A warning, maybe, or doubt. Whatever it was, he didn't say anything more. But looking back now, I wonder if he already knew. If he had seen the signs of the change stirring in Grandpop even then. Because while my grandfather was certainly feeling more like himself again, I think we all missed the fact that maybe it wasn't the same self coming back. As the summer neared its end, the time for the annual hunting trip was upon the men in my family. Honestly, I should have spoken up then. I should have questioned if we should go ahead with it, with Grandpop just having been in the hospital not that long ago. But I didn't. I didn't say a word, because this year was the first year I'd been invited along. It felt like a ritualistic gathering as the men in my family surrounded the table at the center of the cabin's main room. My Uncle Jacob approached the massive slab of oak first, his frame casting a long shadow across the faded family crest carved into the surface. He motioned to the others with his left hand, signaling for them to form a line. I took my newly rightful place at the end, though my intrigue and excitement made me wish I was much further ahead. The air was thick with an almost tangible anticipation, as if the very walls of the cabin knew something momentous was about to happen. The eldest men of the family got their first crack at the artillery cabinet, each taking a rifle best suited for their individual preferences and skill sets. My father surprised me by nudging my shoulder during his turn, motioning that he wanted me to pick instead. Now, I had taken rifle and archery courses during a summer camp when I was 12, but that was a long time ago. Besides that, the closest I came was playing shooter video games. And holding a firearm in your hands and pushing triggers on an Xbox controller were two totally different things. But doing the best I could, I was lucky enough to choose a weapon that no one really had anything to say about. Uncle Benny chose last, begrudgingly so in fact, and I wasn't sure if it was because he got last choice or didn't wish to be involved in the tradition at all. His movements were sad, resigned almost. He trailed behind the rest of us as we headed off toward the path to the hunting grounds. My father and I landed somewhere in the middle, with family both behind, beside, and in front of us. A single shot rang through the air, gathering our attention faster than the bullet fired ever could. My Uncle Benny lowered the pistol gingerly into my grandfather's hands before settling at his sides.
"Listen!"
Grandpop bellowed, his voice betraying the fragility of his age. His arms rose to the sky, allowing his cane to fall freely into the dirt. He looked like a man possessed, his frail frame trembling with energy I'd never seen before.
"Family," he began. "When your grandmother and I started this family all these long years ago, we didn't know what our future would hold. And we definitely didn't expect there to be so damn many of you."
He laughed, and we all followed suit, thankful for the moment of levity.
"But in that time, we managed to give our children good lives. Good enough to where they could, in return, give their children good lives. When she died, the beat of my heart went with her. My Imogene's been in heaven, looking down on all of us while she anticipates my imminent arrival. And I don't intend to keep her waiting much longer."
He paused, allowing the words to settle. Uncle Benny scooped up his cane and handed it back to him.
"Now, with all of that out of the way, I'll get to the heart of the matter. The reason we've gathered here today. It's no secret that the men of our family have hunted for generations. It's something that always brought us great joy. This one will be a little different, as it will sadly be my last. But for one of you..."
He paused again, his gaze sweeping over each of us, locking eyes for just a moment.
"One of your lives will be changed forever. There are only two constants in this world of ours: life and death. I've known I would die for a long while now, and have used that time wisely to save and invest. I'm fortunate enough to leave behind my home, land, vehicles, and enough money for one of you to live comfortably forever."
One of us, I wondered. He cleared his throat.
"With Imogene, her affairs were already put into place before her passing. Mine, however, will be a little different. I did not assign anyone specific because it's up to one of you to decide it for me. All you have to do is win this hunt. The winner will automatically gain access to the metaphorical key to my castle, along with all the cash I've saved, stocks as well as the gain from investments that have paid off in the past."
A murmur of voices broke out, confusion and disbelief swirling through the group. But before any of us could object, a dark smile spread across Grandpop's face.
"I should mention, this isn't your usual hunt,"
Grandpop murmured, his eyes glittering with something both fierce and unsettling.
"And this year, man will hunt man in the biggest hunt of your lives."
My heart pounded, 1,000 questions crashing through my skull all at once. What was happening? What did Grandpop mean? Man against man? Who were we hunting? Was it some dangerous game? Something illegal? But why the secrecy? Why the bizarre tension that crackled in the air between us, like electricity ready to ignite?
What exactly does that mean, Grandpop?
I asked, voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. He turned to me then, eyes softening, and the expression on his face was something I hadn't seen before. Something akin to sorrow, mingled with a deep, almost painful pride. He reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder, the touch heavy with unspoken words. I glanced at my dad, expecting him to intervene, to ask what the hell was going on. But he just looked away, jaw clenched tight.
"You're hunting me, son,"
Grandpop said gently, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the rising tide of panic swelling in my chest. Everything inside me froze. The world seemed to tip sideways, my thoughts spiraling in a frantic whirl. Hunting him? I shook my head, swallowing hard, but the words didn't make any more sense no matter how many times I tried to process them. The words hit me like a blow to the chest, knocking the breath clean out of me. What did he mean? Commotion swept through the group like wildfire, our stunned silence quickly morphing into a low murmur of disbelief and unease. I looked around, expecting to see the same wide-eyed shock in my uncles' and cousins' faces. But what I saw instead made my stomach churn. Resignation. The older men, Dad, Uncle Jacob, even Uncle Benny, shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak up. Like they knew. They already knew.
You can't... What are you talking about?
I stammered, looking desperately at the other men.
This is a trick, right? We're not actually...
But their faces were grim, eyes downcast or flicking toward Grandpa with a mix of reverence and something else. Something darker. Uncle Benny nodded once, slow and deliberate, as if this whole insane process was perfectly reasonable.
"I know it's a shock, boy, and I'm sorry for that,"
Grandpa continued, squeezing my shoulder.
It's an honor, a privilege, for the one chosen to inherit, and for the one like me."
He smiled, but it was sad, the lines around his eyes deepening.
"I'm proud to offer myself up. Proud to die knowing that my successor will be one of you. Someone I love. Someone I trust."
The air left my lungs in a rush, and I staggered back a step, the room spinning. This couldn't be real. It was sick, wrong. But Grandpa just stood there, his gaze steady and resolute, as if he had already accepted his fate. The other men nodded, some with grim acceptance, others with a flash of something like hunger in their eyes. And that was when it hit me. They were going to do it. They were really going to hunt him, like some twisted rite of passage. For the wealth, the power, for the inheritance.
But why?
I whispered, voice trembling.
Why like this?
Grandpa sighed, the fight leaving his shoulders as he slumped slightly, leaning heavier on his cane.
"Because there's more to this family than you understand, son. More than money or land. There's a duty that comes with what I've built. And only the one who proves they can bear the weight of taking my life is fit to carry that duty forward."
Duty?
I echoed numbly.
What are you talking about?
But he didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back, straightening, his gaze sweeping over the gathered men one last time.
"I know this isn't easy. I know it's a lot to ask, but it's necessary. This is how our family survives, how we endure. You've all been strong, brave and loyal. I'm proud of every single one of you.
He turned, locking eyes with me.
But there can only be one heir, one leader. And I'll be damned if it's not someone who understands the price of what they're taking.
What if no one wants to?
I choked out. Desperation was clawing at my throat. Grandpa just smiled, sad and serene.
Then I'll die on my feet, alone. But I don't think that's gonna happen, boy. You've got the blood in you, the fire. And if I have to die to bring it out, then that's a death I'll be proud of. A death that means something.
He looked around, meeting each set of eyes in turn.
You all know the rules. You all know what's at stake. It's time, boys. Let's see who has the strength to take it.
And then he turned and walked out of the cabin, leaving us standing there, stunned and horrified and already calculating, already hunting. The forest, alive with the colors of autumn, felt like a trap as we split up. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, twisting and curling at the edge of my vision, and the summer air buzzed with a tension that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. That's when it started. The gunfire. First a single, isolated shot, followed by a scream, high-pitched and desperate. The sound of feet crunching through dead leaves erupted in a flurry of chaos. A second shot cracked through the trees, and then a third, each accompanied by more shouts. My Uncle Bobby staggered into view, clutching his side. Crimson bloomed beneath his flannel, spreading like an ink blot on paper. He looked up, eyes wide, just as another shot rang out. His head snapped back, and he crumpled to the ground, blood trickling from the gaping wound between his eyes.
No!
I shouted, rushing forward, but it was too late. The shooter stepped into the clearing, my cousin Richard, rifle still raised at where his father stood seconds before. His face was twisted with something savage, something dark. He lowered the gun, eyes locking onto mine.
It's you or me, kid,
he snarled.
Richard, what the hell are you...
A snarl erupted from somewhere behind me, the roar reverberating through my bones. Richard's eyes widened, and before I could even turn, something massive slammed into me, sending me sprawling. The beast was on top of me, its weight crushing, teeth flashing as it snapped its jaws inches from my face. I screamed, shoving it back with everything I had. Its fur was coarse beneath my hands, bristling like steel wool. One of its claws raked across my chest, tearing through my shirt and skin in a blaze of agony. And then, as it lunged again, its teeth scraped against my arm. Just a graze, but the pain that followed was like fire. I kicked out, adrenaline surging, and managed to roll free. The beast turned its attention to Richard, who stood frozen in shock.
Run!
I shouted, but he didn't move. The creature lunged, jaws closing around his neck. There was a sickening crunch, and then Richard's body went limp. I scrambled to my feet, clutching my arm. The wound pulsed, heat radiating from the scrape. But I didn't have time to think about it. I took off, sprinting through the trees, the sounds of carnage echoing behind me. The forest erupted into chaos. Gunfire, Screams and the guttural growls of the beast filled the air. I stumbled upon Uncle Benny next, his body torn open, ribs gleaming white against the red ruin of his chest. A few yards away, my father fought off Uncle Jacob, my uncle, the two of them grappling for control of a rifle.
"You're not taking this from me, Jack!"
Jacob roared, slamming the butt of the rifle into Dad's face. Blood sprayed and Dad staggered, but he didn't fall.
Enough!
I screamed, but it was like they couldn't even hear me. Like none of this was real. A nightmare unfolding in front of my eyes. My dad fired a bullet that took out the side of Uncle Jacob's neck, spurting blood, sinew flapping as he fell to the ground. His eyes remained open for just a few moments before he died, just long enough to fire a shot toward my father from the ground, hitting him between the stomach and the chest. Before long, I was the only one standing, the only one left breathing, and through it all, the beast watched. Its eyes, Grandpop's eyes, glowed in the shadows, tracking my every move. It began to approach me, its plodding footsteps slow and gentle. The creature bared its teeth at me, but refused to charge like it did earlier. A roar resonated from deep in its throat as it stood on hind legs, exposing the most vulnerable areas. The thought occurred to me that this was a sentient choice. Somewhere deep inside, my grandfather wanted me to be the one to win. So I raised my eye to the scope, took the shot, and won. It's been a year since that day, a year since the hunt. The money came through, the property transferred, just like Grandpa promised. For a while, I thought it was all going to be okay. More than okay, really. Life felt good. Better than it had in years. The changes started off small. Subtle things that could easily be overlooked. I moved into the old house on the hill, the sprawling estate my grandfather had loved so much. With its wide verandas and endless acres of dense woodland, the land was pristine. The kind of place you'd only see in real estate catalogs or movies about the American dream. There was even a private lake, ringed by tall pines that stretched up to meet the sky. For the first few months, I threw myself into renovating the place, pouring money and time into restoring it to its former glory. There was something almost sacred about bringing the old property back to life, like I was fulfilling some unspoken promise to Grandpop. I found his old journals too, tucked away in the back of a dusty closet. Entries about the history of the land, the people who had worked it, and his endless plans for the future. His voice was there in every word, and reading them made me feel closer to him, like he was still guiding me somehow. It was comforting, grounding. I started to believe I was doing exactly what he would have wanted, living the life he had envisioned for me. I got a dog, Molly, a scrappy little mutt with mismatched eyes and a tail that never seemed to stop wagging. She was a stray I found wandering the property one morning, and something about her felt right, like she belonged here just like I did. We took to exploring the woods together, trekking through trails that snaked between the trees, discovering old hunting blinds and forgotten paths that seemed to lead nowhere. I'd end each day with her curled up at my feet, exhausted but happy, the firelight dancing across the walls of the old living room. It was like the land itself was healing, like we were healing. For a while, I let myself believe that the worst was over. that I'd survived the horror of that night and come out the other side stronger, whole. I started to think that maybe I really was the man Grandpop had always believed I could be, the one worthy of the mantle he had forced on me. I'd rebuilt, I'd endured, I'd won. But then, things began to change. It started slowly, creeping in at the edges of my perfect new life, like rot spreading beneath a fresh coat of paint. One morning I woke up to find the barn door hanging open, the heavy lock twisted and mangled as if something massive had forced its way inside. Molly was trembling, ears flat against her skull, staring out at the tree line like she was seeing something that shouldn't be there. I wrote it off as some wandering bear, cursing myself for leaving food scraps out. Then there were the dreams. They came without warning. Dark, twisted things filled with snarl and shadows and flashes of teeth. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the taste of blood sharp in my mouth. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and swear that my eyes looked different, brighter, wilder. But when I'd blink, it was gone, replaced by the same familiar reflection. I brushed it off, told myself I was just stressed. The strain of running the estate, of holding everything together. But then I started waking up elsewhere. The first time it happened in late spring. I opened my eyes to find myself sprawled in the middle of a clearing deep in the woods, mud caked to my clothes, the scent of pine and decay thick in my nostrils. Molly was nowhere to be seen. My head spun as I staggered to my feet, trying to remember how I'd gotten there. The last thing I recalled was falling asleep on the couch, the fire burning low in the hearth. I chalked it up to sleepwalking, an old childhood habit come back to haunt me. But the second time, I woke up by the lake, the water lapping at my bare feet. There was blood on my hands, dried and crusted under my nails, and no matter how hard I scrubbed, the stains wouldn't come out. Molly was barking wildly from somewhere far off, and when I finally found her, she recoiled, tail tucked between her legs, a low growl rumbling in her throat. After that, the changes started coming faster, harder to ignore. The land, my land, felt different somehow, like it was watching me, waiting. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, a flash of fur, a dark shape slipping between the trees. But when I'd turn, there'd be nothing there. And then there was the hunger. It crept up on me slowly, a gnawing emptiness that twisted my stomach, clawed at my insides. No matter how much I ate, it was never enough. The meat in my freezer started disappearing faster than I could restock it, and raw steaks became my go-to midnight snack. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was just a phase, just stress, just grief. But deep down I knew the hunger wasn't normal. It wasn't human. It all came to a head last week. I woke up in the middle of the woods again, my body aching, my skin stretched tight over new corded muscle. My senses were sharper, clearer, the scent of damp earth and animal musk filling my nose, the sound of water trickling somewhere nearby like a living pulse. And there, not 10 feet away, lay a deer, or what was left of one. Its body was torn open, The flesh shredded, bones cracked and splintered. Blood soaked the ground, still warm. And the smell of it, God, the smell, made my mouth water. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. But then I caught a sight of my hands. They were coated in gore, thick and sticky. My nails longer, sharper, almost clawed. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I wasn't just waking up in strange places. I was hunting, killing, and I had no memory of it, no control. I tried to deny it, tried to rationalize, but last night I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at a silver knife on the counter. I picked it up without thinking, and the pain was immediate, searing, like touching a live wire. The metal hissed against my skin, blistering the flesh on contact, the burn spreading up my arm like wildfire. I dropped the knife, gasping, and stared at my hand in horror. The skin was raw, angry red, already bubbling. The scent of burnt meat filled the room, and that was when I knew. And now, as the full moon rises, I can feel it deep in my bones, in the marrow of my very being. The change is coming. I'm becoming what he was, a monster in my own land, a beast. The next hunt is mine, and God help anyone who steps foot in these woods, because I don't know if I'll be able to stop. I looked in the mirror yesterday and saw the first patch of coarse fur sprouting along my jawline. My eyes are changing too, yellow like his, and some nights when the moon is full, I hear that roar again, rumbling up from deep in my chest. Last night I tried holding a silver chain. The skin bubbled and seared, leaving angry red welts that still haven't healed. I didn't just inherit Grandpop's estate. I inherited everything he left behind, including his curse. And now, as I feel the pull of the moonrise, I know the hunt isn't over. It's just beginning. And that was The Hunt by author N.M. Brown. A good reminder to read the fine print on Grandpa's living will. Not all family business is worth inheriting. A little about the author. N.M. Brown is a Florida native, wife, and mother of 3 who reads about chasing away monsters to her kids before bed, before writing them down to get them out of her head. She's the former chief operations manager for the Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights network, and now the big cheese for this one. Her written works appear in over 40 horror anthologies, all of which are available on Amazon. The Crimson Hour is a production of the Sinister Somnolence Network, all narration and audio production by yours truly, co-produced by my good buddy, that bald-headed wild man, Geoff Sturtevant. You can follow me on Facebook for news and upcoming releases on both this show and Drew Blood's Dark Tales, my Friday night show on Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights. I hope to see you there too, but while we're here, please hit all those obligatory buttons and share if you don't mind. I'd sure appreciate it. The Crimson Hour is accepting submissions, friend. If you've got a story or two you'd like to be featured on this show, send it to drewbloodhorror@gmail.com. If selected, you'll get the full treatment. And please be sure to check out the other podcast featured on this network, Spectral Margins, which airs on Tuesdays featuring stories from the other side of the proverbial veil. And join our ladies on Wednesday night's Winterific podcast, where it's Women in Horror Month year-round. Ooh, the Crimson Hour's over. And you know what that means. Things are about to get dark around here. So thanks as always for joining me tonight, my dear friends. Do me a favor and drop a like and follow wherever you're listening. And if the spirit moves you, I could sure use some reviews too. And also, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and invite your friends. Hell, there's room for everyone. Meanwhile, I'll see you all next week at the Crimson Hour. Good night, y'all. Say good night, Chester. Attaboy.